Hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson and I'm a videographer here in Toronto, Ontario. In this video, I'm going to walk through using Dehancer Pro in different NLEs. So within Final Cut Pro, Vinci Resolve, and then also in Lightroom. I'm going to be giving my honest review of this plugin. Basically, it's a plugin that allows you to use film emulation techniques and different grading aspects to your footage so that you can add noise, scratches, dust, as well as just different film stocks. In this video, I'm going to walk through the different features of this app and give my honest review in terms of what I like about it and some of the trade-offs of using this app. I was given by Dehancer Pro access to this program, but they've suggested very much to give an honest review. And so if you consider buying this app, you can use the code Blake Anderson Videography. That's all one word in terms of if you want to get 10% off the plugin. There's also standalone plugins that you can use. So there's like noise, bloom, halation, and film stocks. And so that you can consider as well. But yeah, the code Blake Anderson Videography will get you 10% off the plugin. They didn't force me to say anything in this review and tutorial. Rather, this is just my honest review, and I'm mostly going to be walking through just the different aspects of it and giving you a review as well as an overview of the app and plugin. If you like this video, please subscribe and stay tuned. I created a mind map to demonstrate the different features of the application and of the plugin. And so Dehancer Pro is on its 7th version, and it works within the After Effects, Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, Lightroom, and all these different NLEs and photography apps. You can use Dehancer Pro as an effect or plugin within those programs. In this video, I'll primarily be focusing on Final Cut Pro, but also DaVinci Resolve. Some aspect I'll also touch on. This is typically my workflow is using Dehancer primarily in Final Cut Pro, as currently I edit on Sony a7 IV, and I use the S-Log footage within Final Cut Pro. When I'm working with my Blackmagic 6K, I'm editing that typically in DaVinci Resolve just because it works great with the RAW format. In terms of the film, what Dehancer Pro is, it's a comprehensive film emulation plugin, and I would say there's many different aspects to this plugin. It's very much it's tailored for people that really want to get that film look, that analog inspired color grading. So there is all these different sections within the Dehancer Pro. You can separately buy the noise and the film emulation. There's different ways that you can purchase it. You can also get Dehancer Lite, it's called. But for this plugin or review, as well as tutorial, I'm going to really just focusing on the whole package in terms of the full program. And so these are all the different aspects. And I'm going to walk through each of the different features of the app and the plugin. I would say it's very much, there's a high learning curve, I would say, especially if you're not necessarily have a film history background or understand the film process. I have some understanding of working with film in my experience. It's definitely a lot of research I have to do to get more of an understanding of the different aspects of this app. There's very much a learning curve. The vast majority of people probably would maybe necessarily need a program like this. But those that really want to get a unique look and really, I would say, get a more authentic version of film, this program is an all-inclusive program that touches all the different aspects of the film process. As in my other videos, I've went through programs through Maxon One using their Magic Bullet looks, and within that package or that plugin suite, you can add noise and different effects, and I'm sure if people have used that program are aware of that. But I was very pleasantly surprised with using this program with Dehancer Pro, is that it gives you a lot of those things that you'd find in that plugin. And I would say just it has, especially if you're focused more on the film aspect and you really want to get a film look, it's a great, I would say, workflow to add in terms of your post-production. But it might be a bit maybe to think about in terms of you might want to use this program if you're like shooting a film or a short documentary or really wanting to get a certain effect to emulate a film. But maybe for an sit-down interview or more commercial projects, you might not always want to use this program. But that's not to say you can't use it for those, but you might want to tailor back some of the different aspects of it, as this harkens back to a more vintage look, right, when you're using this program. And because it's obviously with analog, it's much different from digital because there's a lot of imperfections, but it's those imperfections, I think this is what this app is trying to emulate, because it's through those imperfections that you really get the character of a film and the grain and the different aspects. So it's just emulating those aspects. As obviously digital within the linear form, it's just allowed for very crisp and sharp, and I think a lot of people have missed a bit of that more, I guess, soul that's in film, and the imperfections is part of that. So this plugin really emulates a lot of those aspects in terms of some of the damage and dust and scratches that you'd find on a typical film from the old days. In terms of what the plugin includes, it includes all these different aspects, and then I'll talk about the film, the different ways you can apply the film emulation. So that's obviously one of the core aspects of this plugin. There's other in-depth features you can very much tailor and customize. But for these purposes, I want to just talk about film development, developers, the one section. And then there is halation, actually film grain, halation, bloom. There's this thing called overscan, and that's just a way in which to damage and give a little bit more of a vintage frame around some of your footage. So I'm going to focus on those areas and just walk through the different aspects, but I'll touch on each aspect of the plugin, but it's just to say that's the different core aspects. To start off, I'll talk about camera profiles. When you first open the plugin, you have your input and you have the ability to select your camera. So I think that's a really great feature, is that you can quickly get to a conversion to a Rec 709 from typically, if you're using an app like this, you'd want to shoot flat or in a log profile, or also in RAW. I found that this plugin does a great job of converting it to Rec 709. In some of my research, they talk about different ways that you apply this plugin. Like it's something like this, you would adjust at the end as like an effect after you've done some of your core. And they do recommend that in terms of doing some maybe the exposure and core color correction aspects of the image, and maybe some masking, then adding this in the third stage. This film emulation software can definitely be used throughout the post-production process, and it's actually built, I think, with those needs. So I've been testing different ways to think about this. You could convert the footage within camera in terms of using their LUT. You could do it within, like Vinci Resolve has their own LUTs, and you can obviously purchase them online to convert them. So you don't necessarily have to convert it in input within this, but that's just to understand that I would say it does a good job of converting the footage to Rec 709. From that, it allows you to adjust the exposure, temperature, tint, defringing, and defringing radius. And within each aspect of the plugin, you enable each of these aspects, so you have to ensure that you click the enable function. This allows the input to convert from a log or raw file to match the color space that you want. Typically, at least within my workflow, I'm relying on Rec 709. I mentioned that those are the different aspects of what you can adjust. This is just to start the process. When you open up the app, you're going to have the input. And then the next aspect is called tool profiles. And so you have these different tool profiles. Starting off, I'm going to talk about film profiles. This is the way that I've graphed it in terms of using my own mind map. It helped me just organize and come to understand the different aspects of the app. These are core profile samples of real films with color, contrast, and exposure characteristics. What I'll show you in Final Cut Pro is you can make adjustment layers. I'm going to apply typically 2 to 3 adjustment layers on top of my footage. If I'm shooting in Final Cut Pro, I tend to use the correction within the AI using Final Cut Pro, as that does typically a good job of just doing a base exposure correction and highlights. My first adjustment layer would have Dehancer Pro. In the second layer, I'm using Mojo by Magic Bullet Looks. And you can then, third adjustment layer, you can do sharpening. I read in the research in the owner's manual that they have, which they do a really good job of documentation, is what I understand is that you could do adjustment layer where you do just a conversion and add the film emulation. Then in the next adjustment layer, you would add a second Dehancer Pro plugin, and that way you could adjust some of the opacity and the output, because if you're doing true film, there's no way to dial back film, right? It's just what you have and what you get. By creating these two adjustment layers, you can lessen some of the effects from film damage and noise so that you can adjust the output within the second layer. It's important to understand that the way in which the pipeline of obviously your footage, because in each step, you want to make sure that you're properly getting the highest quality and following the workflow. It makes sense for what you're trying to achieve, right? And you want to ensure that you're getting the best conversion, especially to Rec. 709, and also just applying these different effects. And so I'm not saying that I have all the answers in terms of what you should do, because you can obviously do ACEs and there's ways to color grade. From my research, this is the way to think about it. The first thing you would do when you open up the app is you're going to have the film developer aspect. This will allow you, in this section, there's film developer, film compression, expand, print, and color head. You can add different types of stocks. What Dehancer Pro does is it emulates film stock, and there's a variety of different film stocks you can add from different years and different brands and companies, as well as ones focus more on film and others that are photography based. I think that obviously can be used as film. The first adjustment you can do is a push-pull of how much it's affecting the film. In this video, I'm not going to go through all the details in terms of understanding everything to do with film and this plugin necessarily. It's quite a high learning curve. I just want to cover some of the basics from my research. Once you've applied the film, you can contrast boost, gamma correction, color separation, and color boost. And that's just, I would say, play around with that. That's the core aspect of this. And then there's film compression. Within film compression, you can affect the impact, the white point, the tonal range, and the color density. Expand, it helps you adjust the black and white. So I understand that this is something that you want to go to often when you're color grading, is to focus on this expand aspect, because it allows you to adjust the black and white points and really affect the dynamic range. I would say that you want to adjust that. In the owner's manual, they encourage you to go back to that, and typically in your workflow, and start with it as well. I found a very nice look to my image because I can really dial in the black and white points. And then there's print. From my research, typically within film, you would have a final print. Within this, you can adjust the print on linear, cine log, Kodak 2383, and there's a few different options that it allows you to use for print. And if you're doing film, you want to stick to the film ones. I found that they were the most complementary to the image. Within film, there's Fujifilm print film, and there's Kodak 2383 print film, sorry. So the Fujifilm and the Kodak are typically what you want to select if you're doing this as a video. The other ones are, I think, my understanding, maybe more photography, but don't quote me on that. Linear is also an option, but you want to play around with that and see how it looks in the image. Some of this is more of an art than it is a science, but within print, you can adjust the exposure, medium, tonal contrast, color density, saturation, and analog range limiter. This is said to replicate optimal printing from 1930s Technicolor, where mediums like 1990s Kodak 2283 added tint and curves for projection or paper prints. And so this is emulating that print process. There's also color heads. This is a tool that allows you for color balance and toning. So you can adjust yellow and blue points. You can play around with that. There's a lot to this app, and that's just one aspect. I imagine you want to stick to what I find interesting is film developer, the film compression, and I guess expand too, because that's something to focus and go back to in terms of the white and dark points. And then maybe you want to do a print. and you can play around with color head as well. But typically, the subtler the better. In terms of grain, Dehancer Pro reconstructs emulation textures using local color and brightness. And so you can adjust the different noise levels between 8 to 65 millimeters, from ISO 50 to 250 to 500. You have different types. You can do negative and positive, and there's different types of modes. So there's analog and noise. You can change the size amount, tonal distribution, and the film resolution, as well as the chroma. And so in terms of type of the noise, there's negative noise, so that's more pronounced in the highlights, and the image has a slightly higher micro contrast, typical for negative films. And then positive uses the classic algorithm that reproduces a softer grain, which is less pronounced in the highlights and is more typical for positive films. So basically with negative, you're going to see a more grainier grain. And in terms of the modes, there's the analog, which is the original type of grain that requires more processing power, but results in lifelike simulation. And then there's just noise, and that's high performance simplified grain for low resolution projects or drafts. So typically you'd just be doing that if you're wanting to get a draft out, but you would be choosing analog for the finished product. Larger granules result in more visible, coarser grain, while smaller granules produce finer, less noticeable grain. So the size amount is determined by the size of these granules. So larger granules result in more visible, coarser grain, while the smaller granules produce finer, less noticeable grain. You can also change the tonal distribution, film resolution, and the chroma. You go into the profile here and press custom. Typically you can there's different selections, so if you just want to quickly select the type of grain you want, you don't have to press custom. But if you really want to narrow down different aspects of the grain in terms of the shadows, the midtones, the highlights, film resolution, all that is found in the custom settings. And that's why this program is very professional and customizable, although there's a high learning curve and you have to really learn about some of these things. In terms of halation and bloom, I want to talk about halation. Halation simulates red and orange halos from light scattering. You can adjust the profiles with or without, source limiter, background grain, smoothness, diffusion, amplify, hue, blue, comp, and impact and mask mode. So there's in halation profiles, there's 8 basic profiles. But then again, if you want to go into the custom settings, you can change the source limiter, the background grain, the smoothness, the local diffusion, global diffusion, amplify, hue, blue comp, impact, and mask mode. And mask mode will actually show you like where it's impacting the source or where the halation is acting out. And then, but basically you might want to just stick with the 8 profiles that they have, but you can also customize it to really refine the look you're getting after. Halation does a good job of helping skin tones and gives that kind of old romantic look in some films. The blooming is different, right? So that's the halation that happens. Usually these work together. In terms of bloom, so bloom emulates light dispersion glow around sources. And so you can again adjust between profiles. So you can adjust between 8 to 65 millimeters. Highlights threshold, you can customize the source limiter, details, diffusion, amplify, save light, saturation, impact, and mask mode. And you can play around with that. I did read through the source material and got some of the what all these different customizations does to the image. But if you're more new to the program, you might want to just stick with the profiles that they already have customized for you. But yeah, blooming really helps the skin tones and it gives that kind of olden day look. And I think subtler the better, because I think you can definitely overdo it. It basically replaces the black Pro Mist filter. And so that it does that in camera. And so you might want to consider doing that when you shoot the project. But if you want to do it in post, this is a way to add some blooming to the highlights and emulates the light dispersion glow around sources. So you get that blooming effect and it softens usually the skin tones, right? And then I also want to talk about the creative effects the program offers. You can affect film damage, film breath, gate weave, overscan, and vignette. So in terms of film damage, you can add artifacts like dust, hair, scratches for realism. So you do that within the customized settings. You have to click that to get access to the dust, hair, and scratches. And so this adjustments. So you can also change different aspects of all those different key, like in terms of the dust, hairs, and scratches. You can adjust further. And this is the historical context is from film, from physical wear in 1880s, paper films, chemical degradation like 1950s. This is something to consider. It gives that a little bit of a vintage look and that old day look. And again, subtler the better depending on the project and what you want to get across, but it's a great way to create some damage in the film. Film breadth introduces frame to frame exposure, contrast, and color variations. This allows you to change the period, exposure, tonal contrast, color, and impact. And in terms of gate weave, this simulates mechanic film jitter through gate. You have different profiles and you can then customize it. And then there's overscan. So this stylizes scan areas with gate perforations. It allows you to create the different frames that you'd find in old film. And so there's different types, and so you have the option to the gate shape, first the gate type, so you can choose between the different types of Super 35, and then you can do it neat, normal, and preparation modes. You can do positive, negative, and make it a vertical film versus horizontal. Then you can change the exposure, scale, lens zoom, offset it by the X and Y coordinates, gate defocus, static gate, and flip. So these are ways to, some of these Instagram films, the old kind of film frame you might find in an old day film, that allows you to add that in post. Then there's the vignette. Typically you want to do that first so you can balance out the contrast and the exposure of the image. That was recommended from what I've read in terms of the program. Those are the creative aspects that you can add, creative effects. And then I just want to cover the last bit is in terms of the output. So you controls the overall plugin impact. So you can adjust the tonal impact slider for all effects. And that's why I mentioned how you can have maybe 2 adjustment layers. So you have a primary layer that converts what you filmed on to a Rec 709 in color space. And then you can also maybe add a film stock. And then a second adjustment layer, you would have all these different effects. That way you can tone it down in the output settings. And so that's just something to consider. And then the generator allows you to export the color contrast looks as a LUT file. So that's a great way to quickly create some customized looks that you want to get for your films. If you really like a certain film stock and a certain style of damage, then you can create these LUTs that allows you to quickly add that to your footage so that you don't have to constantly adjust all these different aspects each time. So that's definitely something you might want to consider so that you have a faster workflow. And that's basically it. That's my overview of using Dehancer Pro. There's many different aspects to this program. In this video, I covered the basics in terms of the different aspects of it and some of the history behind some of these different aspects of film. And hopefully you got a good understanding of this plugin and how you can use it in different NLEs, particularly within Final Cut Pro and Vinci Resolve. There's a big learning curve in some sense using this plugin, and you might want to, maybe it's overkill for what you're doing, but if you get inspired by film and want to harken back to the old days and get some of that real authentic film damage and film look, I would definitely recommend this plugin. It slows down your computer quite a bit when you use a third-party plugin, and so that's something to consider. It is maybe a bit expensive, but if you think about what you get, it is very much a complete suite of tools that emulate the film stock process. Hi, in this part, I'm going to be talking about Lightroom and particularly using Dehancer Pro in Lightroom. As you see here, I have a picture from a conference I attended. The way that you use Dehancer Pro in Lightroom is you click on the image and you can do Edit in Dehancer Lightroom plugin. Before you do this, you have to install it in Lightroom. So what I'm going to do is click into this, go Edit in Dehancer plugin app. Then that's going to allow me to edit a copy within Lightroom adjustments. Click on that, and then that's going to load Dehancer Pro. And you're obviously going to have to activate your license, which there'll be a water stamp over the image if you haven't registered. This is the original. On the left, you can see the different presets. You have an option between choosing your different films. So here's all the different films that you can choose from. And you can choose from your favorites. You can favorite them. Color negatives, motion pictures, color positives, black and white, instant and exotic, as well as cross. I'll just stick with black and white just to make it simple. Let's say I wanted to select this Kodak plus one right here. I like this one actually. So what I'm going to do is I'll select that, and then that's on the left, right? If you wanted to make it a favorite, you would just click this plus button. You can choose your push and pull here. On the top here, use your toolbar, and you can hide that. Once you select it, you might not want to see it anymore. And you can obviously go into settings with this. You can go to your restore your last used settings. And then also there's your undo and forward or redo button. And you can see the clip, like the highlights. So this shows you the clipping. And then this hides the inspector. You can see your scopes or histogram. And you can also zoom into the image with this one-to-one. That gives you a sense of noise and film damage. And with this one, you can see the original to the black and white. On the right, you have different color profiles, so you can select between these. You can change the exposure, temperature, defringing. This is similar to what you find in the film when you're using it in like Final Cut Pro or Vinci Resolve. And you have the output as well as an option there. If you want to do same as output or select one of these, but I'm just going to keep it to save as input. And then there's film development. You can select that, film compression, expand, and within film compression, there's these options. Within print, you can click print and select between what kind of final image you want in terms of a print. I'll keep it with linear. You can use the color head. And then film grain, that's very important. You have all these options of the film grain you want to use. And you can also then customize and change the size, the amount, resolution, shadows, midtones, highlights, color. So it really allows you to refine in terms of what you're looking for. With Emulation, there's again these options, and even further refine them. If you wanted to have some blooming, you can go into custom here and change down the highlighting a bit. Maybe the impact you want a little bit less. So that's what you can do. There's also film damage. And within film damage, you can customize it more within that. And you can change between your like hairs, dust, scratches. So you can refine all those different aspects of the film. Then there's overscan. That's going to create these vintage negative or positive. You can have a positive and a negative. Or you could just have it off. Let's stick with negative. And you can switch between all these types. So those are all the ways you can change it. So that's the different options you can do. You can make it a vertical or horizontal orientation. And this is just kind of a cool look if you want to be a little more creative with your images. You can change the sizes and play around with it. Then you just save it, press OK. That will apply it in Lightroom so you can export it in Lightroom. I would encourage you to read online further about each aspect, but hopefully in this video I should give you a good overview of some key features and ways to think about how you can use this in your workflow.